So this is a historical story. So the reason Islam exists today and the Muslims exist today is because of the nativity story. And that's a huge thing for me to say, but let me explain it. So in the early years of Islam, so the Prophet Muhammad has his revelation, right? He gets his endorsement from the Waraka, the Christian, right? And he starts getting followers. And the message is very simple. Again, it's Abrahamic monotheism. Everyone's worshiping idols. They're killing baby girls because they don't want baby girls, doing terrible things. There's no government. They're raping and looting the poor. I mean, it's a chaotic desert world. And so he shows up and says, there's one God, stop worshiping idols, stop killing your baby girls, start establishing moral, ethical life. And this is a world that doesn't have that, right? So in Mecca, he starts getting these followers, and they're mostly poor people. A lot of slaves convert. People are at the bottom of society, right? Because like this is giving them some hope, right? Whereas Meccans got nothing. Mecca is run essentially by an oligarchy of merchants. It's a pivotal trading town that connects to Yemen with the Byzantine Empire and Iran, the Iranian Empire. So it's like all the trade of frankincense and myrrh and gold coming out of Africa goes through Yemen and into Europe, into Asia, into Europe through Mecca. So Mecca is this trading point, right? Okay, and so they don't have a government. They've got they're basically a bunch of libertarian dudes who went out there in the desert and created a settlement, and they don't have a king. They just got a bunch of rich guys who are making money off the trade, and they're like an oligarchy council, and it's a cultic center with lots of idols, and there's this one sort of central cubical structure called the Kaaba, which they believe, the story is, well, Abraham built this a long time ago, but now all gods are welcome here. So you've got literally 360 idols of different gods from different areas, and it becomes this big religious as well as merchant site. So suddenly the Prophet Muhammad shows up and says, everything that's happening here is immoral and unjust. We need to end the idolatry. We need to have one God. We need to have a moral system. We need to have rules. We need to have laws. We need to, all these things, none of that exist here. Stop hurting the poor. And this is not well received by the Meccan rich guys who are like, what is this crap? Not only they don't believe in anything. They don't care, gods, whatever. But the people believe in it, and they're making money off of it, right? And this guy showed up and saying, destroy all these idols. There's only one God. Okay, well, that's bad for business, right? And they're afraid this is going to mess up the trade that they've got of all these different religions. Everyone's going through here, and they don't like it. And so they persecute them for the first several years. And they basically boycott them. People are not allowed to sell them food. They've got to survive somehow off the land in a desert. So it's a really bad situation, right? So, and there's only a few hundred of them. And then, so it gets so bad that people can't survive. They can't eat. And so some of them desperately, can we get out of here? It's the prophet, right? What do we do? And so the prophet says, there is a Christian king in Ethiopia, Abyssinia, which is just across the Red Sea. Mexico is near the Red Sea. So if you can get to the coast, get on a boat and go to Abyssinia, and the Christian king is a righteous man, and he will protect you. And so they do that. So that includes the prophet's own daughter and her husband and a few people, and they just basically flee in the middle of the night. And they escape these people, and they get on a boat, and they go, and they cross the Red Sea, and they go, and they arrive, and they basically are refugees, and they ask the Christian king, a Najus, they ask him, can we please stay here? He's like, well, are you Christians? It's like, we are monotheists. We believe in the God of Abraham, and we love Moses, and we love Jesus. And he's like, that's good enough. That's good enough. No problem. Sounds good. So he says, you stay with him, right? So now the Meccans are pissed off because these people go there, and Ethiopia is one of their big trading countries. So they're afraid these guys are going to go there, spread propaganda against the Meccan oligarchy and maybe cut off trade. So they're like, crap, we got to get these guys out of here before they mess up our business. So they send a bunch of guys to the court of the king, right? Of the Negus. And they go there, and they say to him, these are refugees. These are people that were criminals in our country. Please give them back to us. We'll take them back to be punished. So he's a good guy. He's like, criminals. What's this? They seem like nice people. They're not causing any problems. So he summons them to the court, right? It's like, so what's this all about? And then they say, well, these people, we're not criminals. We just believe in the one God of Abraham. And these people are persecuting us, and they want us to go back and worship their idols, or they're going to kill us. And we're not going to do that. And so the king's like, worshiping idols? What is this all about? Now he's pissed off. So he's telling, and these are people he's done business with. So the guy, this Islamic story, the figure who was sent was actually a big businessman who knew the king well. So the king's like, so what are you talking about? What's going on here? So now they're panicking because the king's a religious Christian. He's not going to hand over these people that are asking for refuge. And so they say, well, do you know, the Meccans say, do you know that these Muslims, as they call themselves, they insult Jesus. They call Jesus a dirty slave, right? Because Muslims call Jesus the servant of God. In Arabic, Abdullah, which means the slave of God. In Islam, there's no higher honor than to be God's servant, his slave. But, for a Christian who is Jesus Christ is the king. Christ is king. He is the manifestation of God on earth. He's a slave. You're saying Jesus is some humiliated. That's how he understood it, right? So he got angry. He's like, defend yourselves. Are you claiming Jesus is a slave? Are you insulting the Messiah? And so what the Muslims then do is they recite the story of the Virgin Mary that I just recited for you, right? Of them to him. And it tells him the whole story that I just shared with you. And they said that we believe Jesus is God's beloved servant. We believe he is the word of God because he's called that in the Quran. We believe he is the spirit of God because he's called that in the Quran. And we believe he's fully human. That's our major difference with you, right? But this is the whole story of Mary and his miraculous birth and everything. And the king hears this, and this is an incredible, really dramatic moment. He gets up and he goes to them and he draws, using his royal scepter, he draws a line in the sand on the ground between himself and the Muslim delegation. And he says, the difference between you and I, Christians and Muslims, is no greater than the distance between this line between us. And then he turns to the Meccans and goes, these are my fellow believers. They love Jesus and they are under my protection forever. And they will always, and you cannot harm them. And this is the amazing thing. Not only did that community then survive, right, and live, to this day, there is a large Muslim minority in Ethiopia that has never been in conflict with the Ethiopian Christians, has always lived in safety there. There's never been a jihad between the Muslim world and Ethiopia because Muslims were always seen as brothers by the Ethiopians from that moment on. So it is to this day, that story creates that culture of Ethiopia where Muslims and Christians have no dispute, have never had a dispute, right? And they've kept their religions. That is the power of this nativity story. That's how remarkable. To me, that's a miracle. That's an utter miracle that goes on to this day, that a nation lives in peace because of the story, the shared story. I mean, if you believe in miracles, to me, that's a miracle.
It's really beautiful. Yeah, especially just given how much pain there's been between those religions over the past millennia and a half. That's a really, really good story and a reminder of how things can be. Yeah,
and how they should be. How they should
be.
I mean, it's there's a story, and again, it may be apocryphal, but it's an interesting story that when the prophet, I told you about there are 300 idols in the Kaaba in the Mecca. So when the prophet finally defeated these people, he eventually later immigrated. Some people went to Ethiopia. He himself immigrated to this town of Medina, which ended up becoming the first Islamic community and state. And the Meccans attacked it, and there was 10 years of war, and they lost. And the prophet actually made a peace treaty with them that they broke. And under the terms of the peace treaty, he could then take Mecca, and he did it peacefully. He came back with an army. Nobody was killed. Everyone surrendered under the peace treaty, and he gave a general amnesty to all of his enemies, that had been trying to kill him for 20 years. He gave a general amnesty. And one of the things he did was he goes into the Mecca, because this is the defeat of this old system. He goes into Mecca, he goes to the idols of the different Arabian gods, and they're all shattered. He takes his staff and he knocks every one of them down, and the stones are broken, right? And then in amongst all these idols, he finds one, like someone brought an icon of Jesus and the baby. I mean, Mary and the baby Jesus, right? And he didn't destroy it. He had it removed with respect. And he said to the people, and he pointed to the baby Jesus. He said, this is my brother. This is my brother in the love of God of Abraham. Do not damage his image. Just get it out of here so we're not worshiping an image. But don't disrespect it. And that's why, Muslims don't hurt churches, right? I mean, yes, you had these crazy maniacs like ISIS doing stuff, but that's not normative. The reason that ISIS was destroying 2,000-year-old churches in Syria is because there were 2,000-year-old functioning churches in Syria amongst Muslims. Nobody bothered them, right? I've been to churches in West Africa, right? Beautiful churches in Senegal, where it's 95% Muslim. The most beautiful church I've ever seen. Catholic church, huge, but it's a country of Muslim. Nobody bothers them, right? Because the prophet said, leave them alone. And one of the things he did when the Muslims' armies, then they got into conflict with the Byzantines. The Byzantines like, what's happening here? There's a new rising power, and then they fought the Muslims. And this started happening in the final years of the prophet's life. And he knew that the Muslims were going to end up being in military conflict with the Byzantines. And so he sent a letter, which is preserved to this day. It's an incredible thing. If you go to the Christian Coptic a monastery at Mount Sinai, right? Today, the Christian monks preserve a letter that was sent to them by the Prophet Muhammad. Now, the Muslim tradition is that he couldn't read or write, that he dictated it, but that he sealed it with his personal handprint and his ring. And you can see this like letter, parchment letter, which says that to display it in the monastery. And the Prophet says to them that he's giving eternal protection to all Christians, their churches. They will not be forced to convert to Islam. They will be left unmolested. Their priests will be left unmolested. Then their women don't have to become Muslims. And that if any Muslim ever bothers you, you show them this letter from me. And to this day, it is in display as an archaeological thing in the church on Mount Sinai. This letter from the Prophet Muhammad saying Christians are eternally protected, right? And if anyone bothers you, show them this letter.